Good morning, dear ones. When the telephone rings at an odd hour, when the envelope arrives with its demanding figure, when the body whispers pain or the household stirs with conflict, there is an inward flinch that almost every one of us has rehearsed. It is so old, so quick, that we hardly notice it. We look up or we look down, but either way we look outside and ask, "What have I done? Where have I failed? Is God after me?" And if we do not ask it with words, we ask it with a heaviness of heart, an unspoken verdict. Now listen, that is the first lie. That is the cruelest part of the storm. God is doing this to me. If you read through the eyes of the world, you will miss the great point. God does not send storms. The storm is not a message from heaven. It is the world's misreading of life. The storm is not an arrow of punishment. It is a picture painted by fear and personal sense, and then believed. Through worldly sense, trouble is a sentence. Through spiritual discernment, the same event becomes an invitation to stillness. And if we are honest, the heaviest weight we feel in those moments is not the pain or the bill or the quarrel. It is the hidden consent we give to the idea that God is against us, that a power has turned its face and is now our accuser. That, friends, is bondage. That is the chain. Guilt and fear are the fiercest jailers. Guilt is the knot that tightens the rope around the heart. Fear is the wind that keeps the storm alive. We imagine we honor God by calling our trouble a lesson, by crediting divine love with a scourge. But I say to you, that is not reverence. That is slander against the nature of the eternal. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, not condemnation. The aim here is not inspirational comfort. I have no interest in soothing you into a better dream. The aim is spiritual discernment, to see through the lie that multiplies pain, to expose the belief that God punishes, and thereby to unmask the very root of the suffering. We will not be satisfied with pretty statements. Do not make the mistake ever of being satisfied with a statement of truth. It is not enough to say, "God is love," while the knees knock and the stomach twists. There must come, and there shall come, an actual conviction, down in the region of the heart, where something within whispers, quiet and authoritative, "I am not condemned." No one can receive this by personal effort alone, and yet no one receives it without effort, without the labor of relaxing from effort, the holy surrender of ceasing to accuse ourselves, each other, or God. So when trouble comes, and it will come as pictures and sounds and suggestions, stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord, not as a slogan to hurl at the sky, but as a turning, an inner turning from the first lie. Refuse the verdict, refuse the accuser. Let this be our beginning. I will not read my life through the eyes of the world. I will wait to see with the eyes of spirit. And in that waiting, you and I will discover the gentlest truth. You are not being punished. You are being awakened to presence. And presence does not condemn. Presence reveals. Now, if we are to be honest with ourselves, we must ask, through what eyes am I reading this hour of my life? If you read through the eyes of the world, you will miss the great point. The world's eyes are material sense, human reasoning, the courtroom mentality that sits in judgment over every breath you take. It tallies debits and credits. It examines symptoms and bank balances with a gavel in hand. It converts a Tuesday into a trial, and your name into the accused. Worldly sense looks outward, measures effects, and concludes causes by superstition. Something out there is after me. Something up there is displeased. That is reading through the dust of the road, not the light of the star. And so a storm, any storm, comes, and by habit the world makes it personal. What did I do? What have I failed to do? What lesson is God teaching me? And with those questions, fear receives a halo. The trembling becomes piety. The self-accusation puts on a robe and calls itself holiness. We baptize our anxiety with religious language and then wonder why the waters still rage. We think we are honoring God by confessing guilt to satisfy an offended deity, while all the time it is only personal sense condemning itself in its own court. That is why some of you have suffered long. Fear, dressed in devotion, is still fear. Condemnation, spoken softly, is still a sentence. But listen. There is another faculty present in you and in me. There is an illumined state of consciousness by which the same event is read without superstition, without the gavel, without the scales. Spiritual perception does not deny the wind. It denies the verdict. It sees that the picture of disease, of lack, of discord, is the outer shape of an inner storm, and that storms, by their nature, pass when not fed. Spiritual perception reads a diagnosis and hears an invitation to stillness. Spiritual perception meets a bill and discovers an occasion for trust. Spiritual perception listens to a quarrel and recognizes a call to silence rather than counter-argument. It is a different eye, a different ear, a different center. So we ask the pivoting question, because it must be asked if we would be free. Are our problems signs of divine anger, or are they misperceptions to be transcended? Does love send a scourge, or does fear paint a false picture? If the battle were yours, you must fight and lose and fight again. But the battle is not yours. It is God's. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. Stand still does not mean become passive to evil. It means retire from the courtroom of personal sense. Withdraw your consent from the accuser. Refuse to feed the storm with your verdicts and your rehearsals of fear. Punishment, mark this well, belongs to personal sense. It has no standing in the presence. The Christ of which we shall speak is impersonal, and presence does not condemn. Therefore, healing begins at the moment, the very instant you and I lay down the measuring stick, step off the witness stand, and retire to the inner sanctuary. There, without plea bargain and without negotiation, we let spiritual perception come to the fore. We do not try to improve the picture. We consent to see through it. We do not labor to calm the sea. We cease giving wind to it. In that holy withdrawal from the world's eyes, a new reading appears, and with it, peace, the first evidence that grace, not judgment, is on the field. Now, let us say what must be said, and said clearly, because it loosens the tightest knot in the heart. Many of us, in secret, fear God. We fear spirit. We fear what we have been told to call the Christ. We think, if I come closer, something will be taken from me. A demand will be made. A punishment will be exacted for past mistakes. We dress that fear in reverence, but it remains fear. And so, hear me. No one need fear the Christ. No one. No one need fear the presence of God. The Christ is not destructive. The Christ is constructive. The Christ is not retaliatory. The Christ is restorative. The Christ does not send storms. The Christ stills storms. First, the storm within, then the picture without. Why then the blows and the bumps? The rude harvests that sometimes appear in our human scene? Do not confuse consequence with punishment. Do not mistake the outworking of accepted beliefs for the sentence of a divine judge. What you and I consent to in fear takes form as an experience. What the race accepts in superstition takes on a collective picture. But please, please, we are not here to accuse anyone of wrong thinking. We shall not add metaphysical guilt to human guilt. We are here to remove the false image of God that blocks peace. We are here to lay down the club that we have lifted against ourselves and called it holy. Perfect love casteth out fear. It does not install new fears in religious language. When the heart ceases to fear God, it becomes transparent to grace. When you stop bracing for a blow from the sky, you become available to the constructive action of the Christ within. And constructive means this: order where there was confusion, quiet where there was noise, direction where there was wandering, sufficiency where there was clutching. Constructive means the gentle correction of the picture by the presence of reality, not the hammering of a sinner by a superperson. Be not afraid, it is I, is the tone of Christ. Peace, be still, is the method of Christ. Not accusation, not condemnation. Presence. Now, in practice, how does this alter the day? It removes bargaining. It removes flinching. It removes that crouched posture before a deity imagined as temperamental. You can rest. You can retire to the inner sanctuary without negotiation, because the one you meet there does not keep ledgers. The Father within is not offended. The Father within is the law of adjustment, the drawing unto itself of its own, until the picture conforms to peace. And if consequence is moving across the field, if the wind of yesterday's fear is still blowing, stand ye still. Do not add today's fear to yesterday's breeze. Stand still and let the constructive presence reveal itself as your safety. The world's authorities fear the Christ because they imagine loss of power and place. Personal sense fears the Christ because it imagines crucifixion by a tyrant. But hear the paradox of heaven. Personal sense dissolves, yes, and yet nothing true is taken. What is surrendered is the fear that sustained the storm. What remains is life, more life, the life that flows from the center outward. We do not receive this by our doing, and yet we will not receive it without the effort to relax from effort, without the labor of letting go of fear's picture. This is our correction today. Release the false God who punishes, and you will find the true presence that constructs. And in that finding, peace, quiet, steady, law-like peace, begins the holy work no punishment ever could. Now, if we are to let this fear be truly silenced, we must be exact about what it is we are not to fear. Hear it slowly. Let it settle. The Christ isn't a man or a woman. The Christ is a divine state of consciousness. Do not look back 2,000 years for a personality to love or to fear. Do not project ahead for a future figure to reward or to discipline. Spiritual power is never the property of a person. It is not vested in a temperament. It is not an alternating mood in the sky. It is presence, impersonal, universal, forever itself. It appeared through Jesus as it has appeared through prophets and saints, and, in measure, through your mother's kindness, your friend's patience, your own unaccountable forgiveness. It wasn't the head that wore the crown. It was the office. It wasn't the babe itself. It was that which the babe represented, the Christ. Why say this? Because fear clings to personalities, and guilt thrives in courtrooms. As long as you imagine a personal God measuring a personal offender, you have a judge, a dock, a sentence, and you stand trembling. But the instant you realize that Christ is consciousness, impersonal, constructive, universal, the courtroom dissolves. There is no judge counting your missteps. There is only light revealing what never was your nature. Presence does not condemn. Presence illumines. Presence is not an accuser. Presence is the atmosphere of love in which accusation cannot breathe. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from the very premise of punishment, because punishment belongs to personal sense, and we are withdrawing our consent from personal sense. Let us define it, not for the head alone, but to press it down into the heart until it glows. Christ is the presence of God as your very awareness. Christ is the activity of love where you had been active in fear. Christ is the peace that passeth understanding, steady, gentle, unmoved by waves. Christ is the light by which the storm is seen as picture, not substance, suggestion, not decree. Christ is the law of adjustment, quietly bringing each detail into right place without your anxious pushing. Christ is the rhythm of life in which nothing collides, nothing competes, nothing condemns. Christ is that mind which was also in Christ Jesus. That mind which is also in you when you are not busy being a separate self. And then the practicality unfurls of itself, because truth is always operational. When Christ is seen as presence, the problem is no longer a sentence. It is a call to abide. Not a call to argue, not a call to improve the picture. A call to rest the personal sense that would fix, plead, or bargain, and to settle, yes, to settle, into the inner sanctuary where the constructive action of love is already ongoing. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord does not ask you to wait for a person to arrive. It asks you to consent to what is present. The Father within is already here. The presence that is Christ does not come and go with your moods. It is. And as you and I get still enough, quiet enough, transparent enough to this impersonal grace, the old fear of a temperamental deity fades. The guilt that needed a courtroom loses its ground, and a simple assurance rises. I am not condemned. I am called to abide. Now let us look squarely, kindly, at what you and I are calling a problem. Let us name it so it stops hiding under religious fog. This storm of disease that frightens the body. This storm of sin, compulsion, habit, self-betrayal. This storm of lack and limitation, bills, vacancies, delays. This storm of conflict, household frictions, office wars, nations bristling. These stand before us like weather with teeth, and material sense rushes out with umbrellas and shovels and, battle plans. But hear this gently. What appears as an external tempest is, in most cases, the outer shape of an inner storm, an agitation in personal sense projected as circumstance, a mental image believed until it seems to harden into fact. Do not misunderstand me. We are not saying that God sends a test, nor are we saying that you, by some conscious wickedness, have manufactured a plague for yourself. No. We are saying that the world read through material sense is a picture show, and fear is its projector. We are saying that a turbulence within, fear cherished, guilt rehearsed, selfhood asserted, casts itself as a moving picture called disease, called lack, called discord. The Christ is not in that picture. The Christ is the light by which you discern it as picture. Presence does not paint storms. Presence reveals their unsubstantiality. When the wise in you awakens, you begin to see that the problem is not a thing with power, not an entity armed by deity, but a suggestion, appearing real to the senses because attention has anointed it. And here we place a guard around your heart. We shall not add metaphysical guilt to human guilt. This is not a tribunal for wrong thinking. This is not a message of blame. It is a message of remedy. Consequences of belief play across the human screen, yes, but the remedy is never found in fighting the screen. The remedy is not outward combat. The remedy is inward realization. Ceasing to loan reality to the appearance, ceasing to feed the wind. The battle is not yours, but God's. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. Notice the trap. When you accept the storm as an external power, you instinctively begin to negotiate with it. You plead, you bargain, you rehearse speeches to the problem as if it were a judge with a robe and a pen. You take its measurements each hour. You consult its moods. You anxiously interpret every cloud as verdict. In that posture, fear becomes devotion, and attention becomes fuel. The more you watch the waves, the more the waves believe they are the sea. The more you court the accuser, the louder the accusation sounds. This is how a picture borrows thunder. So, what then? Not suppression, not denial, not a brittle smile pasted over a quaking heart. Spiritual discernment is the way. It is the quiet turning from the picture to the light, from the condition to the presence that is never conditioned. It is the holy refusal to negotiate with shadows. It is the labor, that sweet paradox, of relaxing from effort until within the waters smooth. As we retire to the inner sanctuary, as we rest from fixing and pleading, belief is withdrawn from the appearance, and without belief, the appearance loses breath. This is what I mean by waiting out a storm. We do not time it with a clock. We abide it with a poise. We let the constructive action of the Christ dissolve the false reading, and we find, first within, a hush. This too shall pass. And then, without strain, the outer picture begins to acknowledge the peace it can no longer contradict. A problem gains power only so long as it is honored as an external verdict. The instant it is recognized as the outer shape of an inner storm to be outweighed in God, its borrowed authority begins to ebb. Stand still there and watch it ebb. Now comes the labor that does not look like labor, the effort that is effortlessness. Hear the paradox, because it contains the key in its very tension. No one can receive peace by personal striving, no one. Yet no one receives it without a kind of labor. The labor is surrender. The labor is relaxing from effort. The labor is this: to retire from I-ness, from the compulsive I must fix, I must figure out, I must deserve. As long as I is at the wheel, the storm has a dance partner. When the I releases the wheel, presence is felt, and the wind runs out of breath. Relaxing from I-ness is not passivity. It is alignment. It is the difference between paddling in panic against the tide and turning the canoe into the river's current. It is the difference between bargaining with waves and letting the ocean carry you to a still cove. Relaxing from I-ness is the holy consent to let what is already divine at the center of your being come forward as law, as order, as peace. The battle is not yours, but God's. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. Stand still does not mean do nothing in fear. It means stop doing in fear. It means withdraw the anxious hand that has been rearranging shadows and let light reveal what is. How then do you practice this in the hour of pressure? First, notice the taste of your effort. Personal effort tastes like tightness. Personal effort sounds like bargaining. If I do this, will you do that? Personal effort runs by the clock, measures results every 10 minutes, consults the mirror, checks the symptom, rehearses outcomes. Personal effort is future-anchored and past-haunted. It is never here. Spiritual effort, spiritual receptivity, tastes spacious. It is quiet, not because it is passive, but because it is established. It does not argue with the picture. It refuses to certify the picture. It sits down inside and rests in the inner sanctuary with no demand, no timeline, no script. Only the recognition. God is. Presence is. The Father within is already here. Now, practically, return. Return again and again. Do not count the returns. Do not call the returns failure. Each time you feel the clutch of, I must fix, that is your bell. Each time the heart starts to bargain, that is your bell. Withdraw. Breathe. Not as a technique to work a spell, but as a courtesy to the body while the mind lays down its weapons. Sit 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 if you must, with a single consecration. Not by might, not by power, but by thy spirit. Then, when the mind wanders to measuring, return. When it runs to scolding, return. When it wants to peek to see if the sea is yet glass, return. The returns are the practice. Understand, this stillness is not a lever you pull to make God act. God is not elsewhere, waiting to be signaled. Stillness is the recognition that God already is the only presence and the only power. In that recognition, the false picture loses fuel. The storm, unanswered by your fear, passes. The waters smooth within, and then, without your pushing, the outer shorelines begin to reform to the peace they can no longer contradict. This is the most effective doing in a storm. Get still enough, quiet enough, transparent enough, that presence itself dissolves what never was ordained. Stand there and discover effortlessness as effort. Your labor is to rest. Now, let us correct a subtle mistake that steals more time and strength than any visible crisis. In the hour of pressure, we begin to wait. We wait for a sign. We wait for a reversal. We wait for a decree to be lifted by a God imagined to be somewhere else, up there, out there, later on. And with that waiting, fear receives permission to continue its weather. Hear this kindly, but clearly. Stop waiting for a non-existent God. I do not mean there is no God. I mean there is no God outside, arriving by appointment, changing moods, issuing reprieves. The Father within is already here. The one we call upon is not a traveler on the road. It is the life at the center of your being. There is, at the core of you, a presence that lives your life for you. You do not consult it to obtain its favor. You become still to let it be revealed. It is not persuaded. It is unveiled. It is not a visitor. It is your very life. I can of mine own self do nothing. The Father within doeth the works. That is not poetry. That is instruction. When we stop projecting deity onto the far horizon and consent to the inner sanctuary, the source that never left begins to be felt. Quiet, constructive, self-revealing. And in that felt presence, fear has no stage on which to perform. Guilt collapses here because its logic fails. If God is life within you, if the activity of love is the very pulse of your being, then punishment would be life turning upon itself, love prosecuting love, the light condemning its own radiance. Impossible. Presence does not accuse presence. The only accuser was personal sense rehearsing its own case. The recognition of the indwelling Father dissolves the courtroom, dismisses the judge and the dock, and leaves you in a simple awareness. I am not under sentence. I am under grace. Now, how shall we turn? Not with, God, why? For that assumes a distance to be explained. Not with, fix this, for that assumes a picture with power. Turn instead with a single, humble consecration. Father, reveal thyself. Let me see as thou seest. Excuse me, do not instruct God about waves. Invite light to reveal the sea. This is not persuasion. This is permission. Not permission for God to act. God is already the only action, but permission for the heart to stop resisting reality. In that inner shift, the felt experience changes first. A softening where there was bracing, a wideness where there was clutching, a quiet that does not argue. This quiet is the first evidence of grace. Then, without your pushing, the outer picture begins to acknowledge what has been realized. The phone call takes a different tone. The decision becomes clear. The body finds its ease. Supply finds its unobstructed path. Do not time it. Abide it. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord within. Return not to the horizon, not to bargaining, not to peeking at the waves for proof every 10 minutes. Return within, where the Father that is your life is forever revealing, forever adjusting, forever drawing unto itself its own. Healing begins exactly there, when you stop seeking an external verdict and recognize the already present Father within. And in that recognition, peace arrives first, and then the world, as if remembering itself, arranges to agree. Now, right here, at this beautiful turn toward the Father within, I must offer a loving warning, because many a seeker loses months, even years, on this next stone. Do not make the mistake of being satisfied with a statement of truth. The letter is not the spirit. To say, God is all, while the heart still trembles before a verdict, is to hold a map and refuse the road. To affirm, I am under grace, and then crouch to see if the wave approves, is to read the menu and go hungry. The letter about truth may point, but the Spirit alone feeds. The letter is a signpost. The Spirit is the bread. Affirmations, if we are not watchful, become another form of personal effort. We take holy words and, we turn them into levers to move a God we imagine to be withholding. We count repetitions as if we were purchasing favor. We tighten the jaw and recite as though the syllables could hammer a miracle out of a reluctant sky. That is not prayer. That is negotiation. That is not realization. That is the old courtroom trying to draft Scripture into its service. Presence is not persuaded by sound. Presence is revealed to stillness. There must come, mark this well, an actual conviction, not in the head that nods, but down in the region of the heart that rests. An inner settling, a felt assurance that is not emotional fireworks, but spiritual certainty. It has the tone of, peace, be still, not the drama of self-hypnosis. You will know it by its fruit. The breath slows. The bargaining ceases. The timeline dissolves. The need to peek at the waves loosens its grip. Without a single outward proof, you find yourself strangely satisfied within. Satisfied because presence is present. That is realization beginning. That is spirit giving life to the letter. Use questions to test the ground, not to condemn, but to discern. Do I still feel condemned? Then I have not yet seen God as presence. Do I feel I must pay, by pain, by performance, by delay, before I may be free? Then I have not yet withdrawn from the courtroom. Do I sense that God is withholding, measuring out good in installments? Then I am gazing outward, not within. Am I trying to impress God with beautiful phrases? Am I afraid to stop speaking because silence would expose my fear? If these are present, the storm is still believed, and we have more resting to do. Not more talking, more resting. So, what is the purpose of prayer in this way of life? It is not to persuade, it is to yield. It is to yield to the Christ state until the sense of punishment is gone. Even before a symptom moves, before the phone rings, before the account changes. Prayer that heals is the laying down of weapons, the unclenching of the hand, the quiet consent. Father, reveal thyself. Not my argument, but thy appearing. If a statement helps, let it be a doorway rather than a hammer. Whisper it once, twice, and then step through into silence. Stand ye still and know. Wait, without timeline, without bargain, until the inward atmosphere clears. When the heart knows, you will not need to ask if it knows. Peace will speak for itself. And from that peace, the first evidence of grace, the outer picture will, in due season, reorganize to agree. Freedom comes when truth is realized as consciousness, not repeated as a formula. Return there and keep returning until the letter you loved becomes the life that loves you. Now let us pray in the way of release. Enter, quietly, into the inner sanctuary. Not to beg, not to bargain, not to explain. Enter simply to be present and receptive. Sit as one who has laid down weapons and arguments. Let the mind's hands unclench. Let the breath come as it comes. And say, if words are helpful at the threshold only, Father, thou art here. Then grow silent. Do not describe waves to the sea. Do not sell your case to the judge who does not sit. Be here. First, acknowledge the appearance without granting it a court. Yes, a pain, a debt, a conflict, a fear. This is the picture before the senses. Acknowledge it as picture, not as principle. Whisper if needed, this is not a punishment. Then refuse its authority. I will not negotiate with a shadow. Turn, softly but decisively, to presence. Father, thou art here. Let thy peace be my consciousness. And rest. Rest long enough for the inner weather to begin to change. When the mind runs to check the waves, return. When it reaches to fix, return. When it argues that silence is useless, return. Rest again. Here is the holy move. Withdraw fear and self-blame. Forgive yourself for believing in a condemning God. Say it, not to perform but to release. I forgive myself for having bowed to an idol of fear. Forgive life for having appeared harsh. I release the world from my accusation. Excuse me, do not make a ceremony of it. Make a letting go of it. This loosens the knots by which the storm held its ropes. Thoughts will intrude. They will, like gusts at the window. Do not fight them. Do not chase them. Do not shame them. Notice them as storm wind and let them pass. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord within. If a thought hooks you when you notice, gently unhook. Father, thou art here. If emotion rises, let it wash the shore and recede. You are not the shore. You are the awareness in which waves appear and disappear. Keep your seat in the inner sanctuary. Keep your seat. Let simple phrases anchor you, without show and without strain. Father, thou art here. This is not a punishment. Let thy peace be my consciousness. Then silence again. Not a pressured silence, not a clocked silence, a consented silence. Wait as one who knows that reality needs no prodding. Let the peace arrive in its own softness. When peace is felt, even a little, hold it lightly. Do not outline, do not script, do not demand. Rest in a single expectancy. Thy grace is sufficient. The battle is not yours but God's. Allow form to unfold where it must, and do not escort it with worry. Rise only when the heart is quieted, and carry that quiet into the day as your only plan. This is the prayer that heals, not persuasion, but surrender into the awareness of already present grace. Now you ask, how shall I know that the prayer of release has been answered? Not first by the waves settling to your preferred picture, but by a change in the atmosphere of your being. You find a little less fear. You discover less compulsion to explain yourself to God or to the world. You notice the accuser's voice in you is losing volume, and where its sting once lived, there is a surprising gentleness, even toward yourself. The breath loosens. The mind ceases to pace the room, taking measurements every 10 minutes. A simple, quiet confidence begins to stand in the center without ceremony. Stand ye still, it says, not as an order shouted from a pulpit, but as a tone in your own heart. That is the first evidence of grace. Sometimes, yes, the outer picture yields quickly. A call comes, a door opens, the diagnosis is revised, the ledger balances. Sometimes it yields slowly, like snow melting in a patient sun. Do not make the mistake, do not make the mistake of timing God as proof of God. The first proof is the tranquility of the soul, the peace that passeth understanding. When peace appears, you are not waiting for grace, you are in grace. From that peace, the outer picture reorganizes of its own accord, in its own sequence, because presence quietly adjusts all things to agree with itself. The battle is not yours but God's. Your task is to abide the peace and refuse to negotiate with shadows. You will recognize the shift by its fruit. Less self-accusation, more patience. Less rehearsing of speeches, more willingness to be silent. Less running to inform everyone about your trouble, more indifference to the drama of it, not from denial, but from disinterest in maintaining a courtroom. You will find yourself forgiving quickly, yourself first, others next. You will find the hands unclench around outcomes. You will find that kindness appears in your tone where critique used to live. And when irritation flares, it subsides without a legal brief to defend it. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Liberty from the inner bailiff that drags you before a judge, who does not sit. Now lift this one step wider and see the arc of grace across the world. Somewhere along the line, grace touches each soul. Even the desire to be free of guilt is evidence that grace is already at work. The very hunger to know God as non-condemning is the Christ stirring, the Father within calling you out of the dock. And as you and I withdraw consent from punishment thinking, families shift, offices soften, communities rise. There grows a moral sensitivity that cannot stomach cruelty, a collective flinch at brutality once applauded, a deepening appetite for liberty in places where fear once ruled. You can mark the spiritual evolution of a people not by their noise, but by their recoil from harm and their haste toward compassion. This is grace at scale, the same presence widening its reach as hearts lay down the club and take up the lamp. Understand, none of this is reward for having said the right phrases. It is the nature of reality revealing itself when obstruction ceases. Peace is not a tip for good behavior. Peace is the climate of God. As it establishes within, forms begin to consent without. What was stuck begins to move. What was harsh begins to soften. What was chaotic begins to find its rightful sequence. A new life current appears, not whipped up by your will, but discovered as the river you were always in when you stopped paddling in panic. And then, because spirit never leaves truth as theory, this realization asks for embodiment. Something in you wants to bow, to acknowledge the impersonal Christ as the constructive presence that has replaced condemnation. It will be voluntary. It will not be payment. It will be a heart act, simple, clean, unforced, that seals what has been realized. Let us go there next, and let the devotion that rises be the final word of gratitude spoken by the soul that knows. I am not condemned. I am under grace. Now comes the seal, the simple, holy seal that does not purchase grace, but witnesses to it. Always, always, when the Christ is born in consciousness, recognition rises of itself as devotion. Not demanded, not staged, not paraded, voluntary. The wise men were not summoned by decree, they were drawn. They brought gifts not to curry favor, not to bribe a deity, but because their hearts had recognized a presence greater than personality, a principle greater than person. So it is with you and me. When condemnation drops away and peace takes its seat, something in us wants to bow. That bow is the sign. The birth of the Christ is recognized by a voluntary act of devotion. Do not make the mistake, do not make the mistake of turning devotion into payment. Devotion in this way of life is never a price, never an installment plan for blessing. Devotion is acknowledgment. Devotion is the personal sense yielding to impersonal presence. Devotion is the I stepping aside so that the Father within may be all. Devotion is the heart's quiet, thine, not mine, spoken without drama and without bargain. It is not offered to persuade God to be good. It is offered because good has been felt, and the soul can only answer by bowing. It is the crown of self laid at the feet of principle. It is a sign to yourself that the courtroom is closed, the gavel laid down, and grace enthroned. Let it be simple, modern, human. It may be a quiet kneeling on the bedroom floor, not to make a scene, but to let the body agree with the heart. It may be lighting a single candle at the sink and standing in the glow for a minute of wordless thanks. It may be placing a hand over the heart and breathing one soft, Father, thou art here, then resting without anxiety as your gift. It may be a private tithe, an envelope slipped without name where need is present, a devotion to the impersonal Christ in your neighbor. It may be forgiving someone tonight and telling no one you did it, releasing them from your private courtroom. It may be refraining from the tale that would injure, choosing silence as homage. It may be going to sleep without rehearsing the waves, rest as an altar, trust as your incense. The form is not the point. The point is that it be voluntary, compelled from within, bearing the fragrance of recognition, not of purchase. And as you offer it, hear again the final correction and the final comfort. You are not being punished. You are being awakened. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. Do not take the storm's measurements anymore. Let the act seal what has been realized. Christ, constructive presence, has replaced condemnation. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Rest there. Be still. Thank you.